Well, we were wondering if it would be okay if we took a little bit of time to lead the faculty through some physical activity.
There's just obviously academics live a pretty sedentary lifestyle, most of them in this digital age. So I think we were just thinking it would be for since we're spiritual, physical beings, we could actually just do some.
You were thinking calisthenics.
Calisthenics.
I do yoga, so we were thinking we could do some of that. Do you think we have a little bit of time in the schedule?
Start with the hands.
After lunch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really? Would you be willing to do it with us?
Wait. Should I pray for you? Get back to you.
He was totally going to go along with it.
I know.
Welcome to Foreword, a TEDS faculty podcast. I'm Madison Pierce.
And I'm Josh Jipp.
Today, we're so excited to interview Dr. David Pao, the newly appointed academic dean for Trinity Evangelical Divinity School and professor of New Testament. Prior to becoming dean, David was the department chair for Josh and me with New Testament, so we are particularly excited about his leadership. David has degrees from Wheaton and Harvard, and his wife, Crystal, is a biology professor at Trinity College. So, David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and podcast is just a famous thing I'll die for, and it's just wonderful to be here.
Thanks, David Pao, our hype man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, let's start with, let's just get straight to the serious question. Who's your favorite faculty member?
You, of course.
That's perfect. No, I think our listeners would love to hear a little bit about what were some of the foundational experiences you had that sort of led you into vocational ministry.
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home, and being the sixth generation Christian, and it's a bit weird because my whole bunch of them were pastors, and so I grew up wondering, is my faith real or not? Mm-hmm. So like any other good PK, I was converted at 6, and then started doubting, and then reconverted at 12, and then started doubting again in sophomore year, and then but in junior high, I remember listening to a message in a revival meeting, and decided to dedicate my life to full-time Christian ministry. Mm-hmm. So that was in junior high. Okay. And then I decided to be a Greek major at Wheaton. And then moving to MA and MTS and all that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
What were some of you mentioned that you had different periods of doubt. How did you navigate those? Or I don't necessarily want to say overcome, but how did you come out stronger in your faith when you experienced doubt?
Yeah, several periods. First, I thought it was really weird that my experience, I was fully converted, but at the same time wondering, am I really born again? And then, but at Wheaton, with so many PKs and MKs around, and I realized that we had the common experience, converted at 6, doubting at 12, and all that. So we struggled together in some ways. But in graduate school, I realized that I was supposed to be a pastor, and I did not feel that I have the real faith, the authentic faith. And but then my first wife, who struggled with cancer, and then passed away, and that really forced me to ask, who is God? Is he there? Is he present with me? Mm-hmm. And so that was the most formative spiritual experience in my life. Convincing myself that indeed God is real, and there's a different reality out there. So that has been my focus in my preaching as well, that there is some reality out there that we cannot see. Wow. So in reading the Bible, then, that is to force me to look beyond the text into the reality of God, and convincing me that what I see is not all there is to it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, David. It sounds like, so knowing that your family was in ministry and knowing that you have these really deeply pastoral elements to your own story, what led you into academia? How did you end up here at TEDS?
Yeah, when I was in high school, and at that point in Hong Kong, it's a confusing time, is kind of like pre-post-colonial times. So we know that the British rule is coming to an end. So at that point, many questions that we have in terms of culture, in terms of faith, in terms of society, and many theologians have been speaking up and responding to the situation. But then I asked, what about the biblical text? Is that important to me?
Wow.
How is that going to change our mind and change the way we see reality and society and culture? So, seeing theologians speaking on behalf of their faith, and I thought it'd be fun to have a biblical scholar to speak on behalf of the text, to force us to read reality using the lens of the text. So that is kind of what led me to New Testament studies. And then I went to Wheaton and becoming a Greek major and all that.
Yeah. If I can follow up, what are some of the ways, so you're talking about how the text speaks into the cultural experience that you had in Hong Kong. What are some of the ways that experience or that kind of underpinning or that foundation for your studies, how did that play out as you moved forward in your career?
Yeah, I guess growing up in a Christian family, I have a deep sense of not happy with how the biblical text was used. And I hear people repeating the same moral story and giving standard answers and short answers and not treating, as young people, not treating our questions seriously.
Yeah.
Then I thought, I need to find new answers. I need to read the Bible in a new way. Is there anything that is surprising to me? Is there anything that will strike me that is odd? Is there anything that will break my own way of reading reality? So a subversive reading, perhaps, developed early on, probably because of my own sense of unfulfillment, in a sense, not being satisfied with the answers I am hearing, I'm receiving.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Well, David, if I think that it's more comfortable for me to joke and tease you as opposed to flatter you and to be sincere. But
please try.
To our audience, if you'll permit me a short story.
Oh no!
I was 21 years old, youth pastor, looking to go to seminary. Happened to be in the backseat of a car on the way home from a conference with Grant Osborne. Grant said, you really shouldn't give up on TEDS. We've got some outstanding young new faculty. And he mentioned David Pao.
Oh, really?
And then I was like, okay. And then it was like 1 week later, I got my acceptance letter. My formation group leader is David Pao. So I read Acts and the Isaianic New Exodus in David Pao's formation group. And David was a incredibly influential just New Testament scholar and teacher for me. So I'm going to stop with the sincerity and flattery at this point.
No, I need to interrupt you. I remember.
I know it's uncomfortable.
No, I remember those days we had a really small formation group.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
But then Josh was really faithful attendee. Every single week, he was there and asking questions and interacting. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, well, thanks.
A man of the people, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
He used to be nice,
So all that to say is I and others know you as a just really wonderful and gifted New Testament scholar. But now you're academic dean at TEDS, and I'm thrilled. But I'm sure you must see this as an important moment in the life of theological education. Yeah. What do you see are some of both the challenges that we have right now, as well as why you think it's worth actually being academic dean to try to give some answers to those challenges? Yeah,
challenges. I think ideologically we are considered to be a relic of the past, and socially we're considered to be oppressors, and culturally we are irrelevant, perhaps, and politically we sometimes are portrayed as being manipulated into the support of particular parties and agendas. And it is difficult to interact with culture in a sense, with society being polarized. And I think the first step we need to do is to focus on the center, to focus on the gospel, to focus on the text. And I think the stronger that we stare at the text, the easier time we have in negotiating that which is important for us elsewhere. And so to be faithful, to the gospel, and then to be able to interact charitably with all that is, surrounding us is important. And in a polarized society, I think theological education is to provide a space for dialogue. And it's not simply to transmit data, but it is to provide a space for meaningful theological dialogue and interaction. And that's what it is, I think.
That's great. Yeah. So you envision one of your goals or tasks as basically providing those spaces for where all of us can come together,
right,
and talk about sort of like what does the text say, and hopefully in a way that won't lead into tribalism or just entrenched tribalism.
Right. I think if we hold on to the center and reaffirming our common creed, then we will have room for debate and dialogue.
Yeah.
And but we need to resist being pulled to one side or the other side. So Trinity is known for being able to nuance our material, the way we present the biblical gospel, and we should continue to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Amen. Thanks, David. Moving in a slightly different direction, I think that even as dean, you'll still be teaching. Maybe not immediately, but you'll be back in the classroom before we know it. And you've typically taught classes on New Testament backgrounds and Second Temple literature. Why do you think that some of those courses are essential to our New Testament program here?
I think it is important to be able to read the biblical material in light of those extra-canonical texts, because we need to see what is surprising to the ancient audience and what is author trying to say. I believe that meaning resides in the interaction between text and context. So to know what the author is saying, we need to figure out how he's correcting the misunderstanding in the culture. One example, reading Jewish apocalypses, let's say, it's easy when you are being oppressed for 500 years to consider the other as the enemy. So Satan resides in the Gentiles. They are the evil ones. In light of that, reading Revelation 2 and 3 is surprising to me, that John would, in his own apocalypse, would criticize the church, although they were still being persecuted. Then they would first criticize the church by saying, when you're talking about evil being in the other, wait, is evil in you as well? Are you being controlled by Satan? Are you controlled by the evil one? So instead of, as in many Jewish apocalypses, instead of beginning with a critique of the Gentile pagan culture, you find John criticizing our own, saying that evil may reside in ourselves. So that is a good reminder for us as well. Nowadays, it's easy to identify that person as being evil, that country, that culture as being evil. But John is saying, wait, look within yourself, and evil resides in you, perhaps too. So so comparing the biblical material to the ancient text, then you find what the inspired text is saying, what's surprising, what is amazing, what is subversive.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah. Disrupts your expectations based on what you think you're going to see.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. What would you say? Let me see if I can guess what your favorite extra canonical Jewish book is. Do you have one picked out?
Not Jewish, but
it's not Jewish. I was going to pick Tobit. It's not Tobit.
Tobit, I would say, is Jewish, perhaps. But I'm thinking of an early Christian apocrypha.
Oh, early Christian. Christian.
Early Christian apocrypha.
Acts of Paul and Thecla?
Part of it, perhaps.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of the infancy gospel of James.
Okay.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Why? What do you love about it?
Because there you find, written by Roman Catholic theologians, so to speak, defending Mary, saying that, if Mary is the mother of God, she must be unique, she must be virtuous, she must be holy, and she must be separated from humanity. And then you find the entire work focusing on how special Mary is. And I find the rewriting in that gospel of Luke 1 being quite interesting. In Luke 1, you find Elizabeth meeting with Mary. And then you'll find Elizabeth saying, you are blessed among all women because you're the mother of God, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you find Luke then giving the second word of blessing through Elizabeth, saying, well, you are blessed because you're obedient. Then the question is, what is more important? Is it to be blessed because you are the uniquely mother of God? Or is it more important to be blessed because you're obedient to God? And I think in Luke, the latter became more important. That Mary was honored and venerated, not because she was a mother of God, but she was faithful to the end among the 120 or so, praying, in Acts 1, waiting for the Spirit. But in the infancy gospel of James, insisting on the unique status of Mary, they will take away the second word of blessing, focusing only on the first word. You are blessed because you are the mother of God. So reading the apocryphal material will highlight to me the striking parts of it that we find in the canonical stuff. So, without the apocryphal material, at times, even the earlier text, what they're trying to focus on can be missed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a helpful reminder. I wasn't expecting you to go kind of post-canon or post-canonical, but those texts are really interesting pieces of reception of especially the earlier Gospels. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I have all kinds of like personal anecdotes. It's making I had New Testament Apocrypha with David, and I still remember, I think it was Pseudo Gospel of Matthew working on it. It was like, hey, they do the proof texts or, the fulfillment quotations, but there's no interest in salvation history. It's just sort of
yeah.
That's good.
Well, I was really hoping to get into more Tobit, but maybe we'll save that for another podcast.
I'll have you back just for extra canonical text.
Just a Tobit podcast.
We may be the sole audience. I hope that's not the case, but oh goodness. Going back to the canon, and you may have some more extra canonical nuggets of wisdom for us here, but I know you just completed a commentary on the pastorals.
Right.
And I wonder if you have some general words of wisdom about interpreting the pastorals, especially in our present age, and maybe some of the themes that you would want to see highlighted in our discussions.
Yeah, it's an interesting project I worked on for the past 10 years or so. The term subversive, again, is important. In the past, we considered the PE to be the handbook for the church.
Yeah.
And then some would say, no, not a handbook, but it's a response to heresies.
Yeah.
And then others would say, no, it's not exactly that, but it's someone else, not Paul, putting out, writing this particular collection of works, reflecting an accommodating sense that, forget about the striking subversive gospel. Here you have, in second generation, people conforming to mainstream society. Yeah. So you find foreign vocabs in the Pastoral Epistles. You find un-Pauline materials, I would say. But then my reading is that those were probably intentional on the part of Paul, and Paul is trying to be subversive, using vocabs that you find elsewhere in making a point, in challenging culture and society. One example, 1 Timothy 2, the famous, 1 to 6, 2, 1 to 6, praying for the emperor, and not to the emperor. And so that seems to be Paul's way of saying, respect the emperor, but he's not God. So he would say, pray for all the people first and pray for the emperor. So the emperor is subsumed under all the people and being relativized under all the people.
Yeah.
And then he would go on to say that there's only one God and our Savior. And he would say that there's only one mediator between God and humanity, and there's Jesus himself. So that to me is subverting the dominant ideology of the time. It's not simply anti-imperial though, because you find, say in chapter 4:12, when I memorized the verse when I was really young, let no one despise you because of your youth. And there, recognizing the honor-shame language, Paul is using that language in saying that even the younger folks among us, they are the honorable ones. Not simply the king, not even the elders, but the younger ones. And then in chapter 5, verse 3, you find Paul saying, honor the widows.
Yeah.
So you find the same pattern, not honoring those who are honorable, but honor those who are at the margin. So you find a consistent interaction with culture and subverting the entire honor and shame framework in saying that, in the family of God, there is only one people of God. And we are all equal in some ways. Yeah. So is that subversiveness that I find throughout 1st, 2nd Timothy and Titus that's surprising to me. And so it is not exactly a static handbook. It is not simply a response to heresies. It's not accommodating for sure, but it is subversive to me that in every single paragraph you find Paul subverting the ideology of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feel free if you want to follow up with more examples, but the subversiveness that you're describing there sounds an awful lot like other Pauline texts. I mean, that is bringing to mind Philemon, for example, but there are other ways that Paul shapes that.
Right. Yeah. Because in chapter 6, you find, talking about Philemon, In 1 Timothy 6, you find Paul using benefaction language and applying that to the slave, so that you can be the benefactor and not simply the client, again, subverting the entire system and saying that those at the margin can have a place at the table.
Yeah, that's a great point. Oh, and before we move forward, I don't know if you have more follow-up on the pastorals, but it's in the Brill commentary series. Will you plug it a little bit? So what series is it?
Yeah, it's called the Brill Exegecal Commentary Series, and it's edited by Stanley Porter, focusing on not simply context, but also language as well.
Excellent.
So,
And when can we look forward to it?
Before I retire, I hope. I submitted in December, so still waiting for the process to go through.
Oh, that's great. That's
Wonderful.
Great. Well, we could talk about the pastorals all day, but we probably don't have time, right?
I don't know why you're looking at me.
Another important thing about you is you've traveled extensively, doing conferences, preaching, and so forth. Yeah. Do you have a favorite place to travel? You just I do. I have probably two. Okay.
Been there more than once. Athens and Barcelona.
Okay.
Those two places. Barcelona, I gave a commencement address one time. But what is memorable in both places is that I was able to bring my daughter there. Because we have twin girls, and it's easy to have to consider them as interchangeable at times. So at one point, I decided to be intentional and to bring one girl at a time to trips. So I brought one to Barcelona, and that was wonderful, and brought one to Athens. And for both of them, those were really memorable time, and to me, it's really important too.
How old were they at the time?
Athens for Charis is only like a year to 2 years ago.
Okay.
So they're 21, so 19. And Barcelona for Serena 3-4 years ago.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
We were in Barcelona. It may have been more like 5 or 6 years ago, but we really loved it. We say that that's one of the places that we could live out our days. It's just sunny and beautiful. And
Serena is still trying to get me to take a sabbatical and go to a coffee house with her for half a year in Barcelona, being barista, selling coffee. Yeah. So
sounds like something I would do.
Yeah, I'll apply for sabbatical soon, I guess.
Amazing.
That's cool.
That's great. And I, anecdotally, I think the first year that I was teaching here, every time I emailed you, it was like, well, I'm in Melbourne or I'm in Hong Kong. I'd be like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that you have some kind of time-changing or time-altering device, a time turner or some kind of TARDIS or something that you're using to travel the world. But we'll let you keep your secret for now. Another thing is, we've got space to think about the future now. And obviously, we hope that there are a lot of things in Ted's legacy that continue on, but also hope that you have some bright ideas for where we're headed. So what are some of the things that you hope for us in the future?
Yeah, I think at this point, emerging from COVID, we need to rebuild our community to be able to live within the same community, being honest with one another, and also to affirm our differences. At times, we think of the good old days that, when we were different and when we have but then, we always, in dialogue in the past, struggling with issues and being faithful in our struggles as well. And I think that needs to be continued, that we are one community, but we need to struggle and we need to be voicing out our concerns. And we need to be different as well, having the same gospel. And at the end, if I were to ask, what is ideal theological education, I would say, well, we should probably focus on the ideal pastor that we are trying to produce.
Yeah.
An ideal school is not one with a big library. It's not one with a great building, but it's one who's able to produce an ideal pastor. An ideal pastor to me is one who's able to admit and see his own or her own impotence, and thus relying on the gospel of the cross. But at the same time, being able to proclaim the powerful word of God in different setting. And at the end, being subversive by saying that, look beyond me to see a different reality through the gospel that I'm preaching and through the life that I'm living. So, it'd be tempting to build the best text there is to it. But I think it's far more enticing to build the best school to produce the best pastor. So that's our goal, to be able to produce a good, faithful servant of the gospel.
That's great. But I want to highlight, I love how your definition of the best pastor is one that is subversive. It's not, right, in terms of what you said, it's not one that's like accruing power or, popularity or, great personality per se, but it's one that's proclaiming the word of God, right, out of that person's own humility, weakness, and that's obviously something we look around and see that we need really desperately right now. So.
Yeah, I think John Wesley got it right. He would say that, the reason why we need revival is because we had revival in the past. We had revival in the past producing good Christians, and they became successful. They became powerful, and then they rely on themselves. And then we need revival again to be humbled and to recognize the gospel, which is far more powerful than we are.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Well, I think, do you have anything else you want to follow up with?
Hopefully not.
Well, we could always go back to Tobit. I don't know.
Actually, I think before we go, there is one more thing. I have heard some excellent stories about pranking Josh over the years. Do you have a favorite time that you pranked Josh?
Me getting pranked?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's one story that involved Kay, right? Where David and your mom were in cahoots. Is that right?
I had an exegesis class that
Is this appropriate for the airwaves?
No, I think one of my first exegesis classes. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
What do you remember of it?
Well, get an email from your mom, right? Asking me some information about a class that they want to deliver something into your classroom on your birthday, perhaps.
They built it up. They're like, you've been such a great professor, and we've got this gift for you. And I'm like, this is just heartwarming. And then I open it in front of all of them, and it's like this family prank gag gift.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so this is actually your mom pranking you.
Those are more elaborate than me just like leaving a rotten banana in David's desk, on David's desk, I think.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out where it came from. I thought, did I bring a banana to my office?
Yeah, you all have quite a back and forth going. Oh, goodness. Well, we'll have to save some more stories for next time. We'll let you brainstorm a little bit next time. All right. Well, that's just the foreword. If you want to hear more from Dean Pao, then be sure to check out his excellent commentary on Colossians and Philemon. Honestly, David, that's one of my absolute favorites. Probably my favorite commentary on Colossians and Philemon, and really love using it in the class. So with that in place, I think that your commentaries on pastorals, and you have another forthcoming one on Matthew, is that right? If you've ever used the Zondervan Exegetical one on Colossians and Philemon, then you know that we've got lots to look forward to. The book that Josh mentioned, Acts and Isianic New Exodus, I think is probably one of your most prolific works and should continue to be read and explored. But make sure to connect with Dr. Pao through these works, but the best way that you can connect with him is to enroll here at TEDS, especially in our MA and PhD in New Testament, where he'll continue to teach, including the courses that we've mentioned already. So we hope that you've enjoyed learning more about our friend, colleague, and leader, Dean David Pao. And with that, we want to thank our ruddy and delightful producer, Curtis Pierce, our fun and fantastic graduate assistant, Lauren Januzik, and all of you wonderful people for tuning in. So thank you. I'm Madison.
Thank you, Madison, and thank you, Josh.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Foreword is a podcast hosted by faculty at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. The views expressed by the hosts and guests of Foreword do not necessarily represent the views of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. You can subscribe to our newest episode on your preferred podcast app or at forwardpodcast.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Foreword Podcast to get updates and additional links to content. Trinity Evangelical Divinity School is located 25 miles north of Chicago with extension sites across the country and online. Trinity educates men and women to engage in God's redemptive work in the world by cultivating academic excellence, Christian faithfulness, and lifelong learning. You can find more information at teds.edu.